Dawn broke over the quiet suburbs of Alexandria, Virginia, when Lucy's desperate barking shattered the morning silence. The German Shepherd hadn't stopped since first light, her cries echoing through the peaceful neighborhood. Standing guard beside James Wilson Jr.'s coffin, Lucy's distress grew more urgent with each passing moment. "That dog hasn't quieted since they brought him home," whispered Sarah Wilson, her voice trembling as she watched her son's faithful companion. James Jr., a decorated military officer, had reportedly died during a classified operation just a week ago. When Michael Thompson, James's childhood friend and former detective, finally convinced Sarah to open the coffin, their world turned upside down. The polished mahogany casket meant to hold the body of a fallen hero was empty. In the distance, a black van's engine roared to life, tires screeching against asphalt as it disappeared into the morning mist. Lucy's barking suddenly stopped, replaced by a low, knowing growl. The Wilson home sat nestled in a tree-lined street of Alexandria, Virginia, just miles from the Pentagon, where both James Sr. and Jr. had served their country. The two-story colonial house, with its white picket fence and well-tended garden, held 30 years of military family history within its walls. Sarah Wilson, now 54, had maintained the property meticulously since her husband's disappearance in 2004. A former intelligence analyst herself, she'd left her career to raise James Jr., channeling her analytical mind into creating the perfect home. Family photos lined the walls. James Sr. in his dress uniform, young James Jr. at his military academy graduation, and countless moments of happier times. James Wilson Jr. at 29 had followed precisely in his father's footsteps, joining the same special operations unit. Tall and composed like his father, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who knew his purpose. His closest companion, Lucy, had been by his side for 5 years, a military-trained German Shepherd with intelligence that sometimes seemed almost human. Michael Thompson, James Jr.'s best friend since childhood, lived next door. A former detective-turned-private investigator, Michael had watched the Wilson family's tragedy unfold 20 years ago when James Sr. vanished during a classified mission. He'd sworn then to protect what remained of the Wilson family, a promise that now weighed heavily on his shoulders. General Robert Anderson, commanding officer of the unit, had been a constant presence in their lives. He'd mentored James Jr., guided his career, and been there for Sarah during her darkest days. His silver hair and weathered face spoke of decades of service, but lately something in his eyes suggested he carried secrets that were becoming increasingly difficult to bear. The quiet neighborhood, with its manicured lawns and American flags, seemed an unlikely setting for the events about to unfold. Yet beneath this peaceful facade, decades-old secrets were stirring, and the echoes of past decisions were about to resurface with devastating consequences. The morning Lucy's barking changed everything. This carefully maintained world began to unravel, revealing that the bonds of family, loyalty, and duty were about to be tested in ways none of them could have imagined. 1 week earlier, on a crisp autumn morning, Sarah Wilson received the visit every military mother dreads. General Robert Anderson stood on her doorstep, his face grave, accompanied by a chaplain. Lucy, usually welcoming to the general, hung back in the hallway, her tail low and still. Sarah Anderson began, removing his cap. "I regret to inform you that James was killed during a classified operation yesterday afternoon." His voice, usually commanding, cracked slightly. "It was quick. He didn't suffer." Sarah gripped the doorframe, her world spinning. "No," she whispered. "Not like James Sr. Not again." Her knees buckled, but Anderson caught her before she fell. The days that followed passed in a blur. The official story cited a training accident, but Sarah knew better. The night before his last mission, James Jr. had called her, his voice tense. "Mom, if anything happens, there's something you need to know about Dad's disappearance," he'd said. But the connection cut off before he could finish, and that was the last time she heard his voice. The military handled all funeral arrangements with unusual speed. When Sarah requested to see her son's body, she was told the injuries made it inadvisable. General Anderson personally assured her that a closed casket would be more appropriate. "Your son died a hero," Sarah Anderson had said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Some details of his service must remain classified, but never doubt his courage." But something felt wrong. Lucy refused to eat, spending hours staring at James Jr.'s photograph on the mantel. The dog's behavior grew increasingly agitated as the days passed, especially when military officials visited with condolence calls. The morning of the funeral, Sarah found a crumpled note in James Jr.'s uniform pocket. "Trust Lucy. She knows." The handwriting was unmistakably her son's. The Wilson home filled with the somber business of funeral preparations. Sarah moved through the motions mechanically, selecting flowers, approving the service program, and accepting casseroles from well-meaning neighbors. Each decision felt like another nail in a coffin she wasn't allowed to open. Michael Thompson stayed close, handling phone calls and visitors when Sarah couldn't face them. He noticed peculiarities: the military's insistence on specific funeral arrangements, the constant presence of unmarked cars on their street, and most troublingly, the way General Anderson's staff seemed to monitor their every move. "Something's not adding up," Sarah Michael confided one evening, keeping his voice low. "I've worked enough cases to know when details don't align." But Sarah was lost in her own grief, clutching James Jr.'s last photo in her trembling hands. The photo showed James Jr. and Lucy at his promotion ceremony 6 months ago. His smile held a shadow she hadn't noticed before, a weight in his eyes that reminded her hauntingly of James Sr.'s last photograph. The same ceremony where he'd pulled her aside, speaking in hushed tones about investigating something bigger than all of us. Lucy paced the house restlessly, refusing to leave the coffin once it arrived. The dog's behavior became increasingly erratic, growling at military officials who came to finalize arrangements, particularly at Colonel Richards, James Jr.'s direct superior. "She's never acted this way," Sarah remarked, watching Lucy bare her teeth at the colonel. "James trained her better than this." The night before the funeral, Sarah found herself in James Jr.'s room, breathing in his lingering presence. In his desk drawer she discovered a sealed envelope marked "For Mom if they say I'm dead." Her hand shook as she held it, but before she could open it, car lights swept across the driveway. Lucy's behavior grew increasingly deliberate and purposeful. The German Shepherd began carrying James Jr.'s old possessions to Sarah, first his boots, then his jacket, and finally persistently nudging his locked metal box from under the bed. Each item she brought seemed less like a dog seeking comfort and more like a message she was desperate to convey. "She's trying to tell us something," Michael observed, watching Lucy scratch at James Jr.'s desk drawer. "Military dogs are trained to signal when they detect something wrong." The morning of the funeral, Lucy's actions became more urgent. She stationed herself beside the coffin in the living room, her posture alert and tense. When Colonel Richards arrived early to review the funeral protocols, Lucy's behavior shifted dramatically. She positioned herself between the colonel and the coffin, her usual friendly demeanor replaced with a vigilant guard stance. "Perhaps she should be confined during the service," Richards suggested, eyeing the dog warily. "Emotions run high at these times and animals can be unpredictable." But Sarah remembered James Jr.'s note, "Trust Lucy. She knows." At dawn, Lucy's barking took on a new intensity. It wasn't the mournful cry of a dog missing her master, it was the urgent alert bark she used during her military training. She ran between the coffin and the window, then back to Sarah, her actions becoming more insistent with each pass. "She's never been wrong," Sarah Michael said quietly, watching Lucy's determined behavior. "In all my years in law enforcement, I've learned to trust trained dogs. They sense things we don't." Sarah stood, her grief momentarily overshadowed by a mother's instinct. Something about Lucy's desperate attempts to communicate, combined with James Jr.'s cryptic last phone call and the hidden envelope, stirred the analytical mind she'd suppressed for 20 years. "Open it," she whispered to Michael, moving toward the coffin. "We need to know." With trembling hands, Michael unlocked the coffin's clasps while Sarah held Lucy close, her heart pounding against her ribs. The morning light streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the living room, as they carefully lifted the heavy mahogany lid. "Dear God," Michael whispered, his face draining of color. The coffin's silk lining was pristine, undisturbed and empty. No body, no personal effects, nothing but a small piece of paper tucked into the corner, bearing 3 words in James Jr.'s distinctive handwriting: "History repeats itself." Sarah's legs gave way and she sank to the floor, Lucy immediately pressing against her side. The room spun as 20 years of buried memories surfaced. James Sr.'s empty coffin, The same rushed funeral arrangements. The same insistence on a closed casket. The same secretive glances among military officials. "They're connected," she breathed, her analyst mind clicking into gear. James Jr. wasn't investigating just anything, he was investigating his father's disappearance. Through the window they caught movement, a black van parked across the street, its engine idling. Two men in dark suits emerged, moving with the distinctive precision of military training. "Sarah, get your coat," Michael ordered, his detective instincts kicking in. "Whatever's going on, we need to move. Now." Lucy's growl deepened as footsteps approached the front door. Sarah grabbed James Jr.'s envelope from her pocket, and the metal box Lucy had been so insistent about. The back door offered their only escape route. Just as they slipped out through the kitchen, they heard the front door open. General Anderson's voice called out, but it lacked its usual warmth. "Sarah, we need to talk about James." They crept along the back fence, Lucy leading the way with practiced stealth. The dog had done this before. Sarah realized she'd been trained for exactly this type of situation. In the distance, more vehicles were arriving, their tires crunching on the morning frost. Michael guided them toward his garage, keeping to the shadows. "My car's ready," he whispered. "James Jr. asked me last month to keep an emergency bag in my trunk. He knew this day might come." Sarah clutched the envelope and box to her chest, her mind racing. Both her husband and son had vanished under identical circumstances, 20 years apart. This was no coincidence. The military's careful orchestration, the surveillance, Lucy's training, it all pointed to something massive, something that had been in motion since before James Jr. was born. "Whatever this is," she said, her voice steadying with resolve, "it started with James Sr., and our son found out the truth." Lucy's ears perked up as the sound of car doors slamming echoed from the front of the house. Their window of escape was closing fast. The sound of multiple footsteps filled the Wilson home as military officials swept through the rooms with practiced efficiency. Through the gap between Michael's garage doors, Sarah watched General Anderson directing his men with uncharacteristic tension in his movements. "Full sweep of the premises," Anderson ordered, his voice carrying across the morning air. "They can't have gone far. And remember, Mrs. Wilson is not to be harmed. She's as much a victim here as anyone." Colonel Richards emerged from the house holding Lucy's chew toy. "Sir, the dog's trail is fresh. They left minutes ago." He paused, examining the toy closely. "And there's something else. We found signs that the metal box is missing." Anderson's face darkened. "That complicates things. If she has the box," he pulled out his phone, speaking in hushed tones. "Eagle's Nest is compromised. 20 years of work at risk." "Yes, sir." Understanding the significance. From their hiding place, Sarah clutched the metal box tighter. Michael touched her arm gently, motioning toward his car. They had to move, but the driveway was exposed. Lucy pressed against Sarah's leg, her training evident in her silent alertness. "Sarah," Michael whispered, "whatever's in that box, an envelope, James Jr. risked everything to get it to you. We need to honor that trust." A new voice joined the scene outside, a voice that made Sarah's blood run cold. Assistant Director Wesley Parker of Military Intelligence, the same man who had handled James Sr.'s case 20 years ago. He hadn't aged well, but his commanding presence remained unchanged. "Anderson," Parker called out, "this is no longer your operation. My team takes over from here." He surveyed the area with cold efficiency. "Mrs. Wilson must be found before she opens that box. 20 years of secrets don't unravel today." Sarah's hands trembled as she gripped the mysterious box. The same man, the same situation, 2 decades apart. She thought of James Jr.'s last words on the phone, "Something you need to know about Dad's disappearance." The pieces were starting to align, forming a picture she wasn't sure she was ready to see. Michael's garage had a back door leading to an alley. It was their only chance. Lucy seemed to understand, positioning herself to lead the way. The dog's military training was revealing itself in layers. She wasn't just James Jr.'s companion, she was his failsafe, trained to protect his mother if history indeed repeated itself. "On my signal," Michael breathed, watching the search pattern of the men outside. When they rounded the corner, he reached into his pocket, pulling out a set of keys with a familiar logo, James Jr.'s private storage facility across town. Sarah nodded, understanding flooding her features. Her son hadn't just predicted this moment, he had planned for it. Every detail down to Lucy's training had been orchestrated for this exact scenario. The storage facility loomed before them, a nondescript building on the outskirts of Alexandria. Michael's car had taken a circuitous route to ensure they weren't followed while Lucy remained vigilant, her training evident in every measured movement. Unit 247, the number matched the one engraved on the metal box in Sarah's hands. When they rolled up the door, Sarah gasped. The small room was a meticulous command center, walls covered with photographs, documents and maps, all connected by red strings. At the center was a large photograph of James S.R., surrounded by newspaper clippings about his disappearance. He was investigating, Sarah whispered, approaching the wall. All this time James Jr. was piecing it together. Michael examined the documents. These go back decades. Operation Eclipse, multiple agents vanishing. All ruled accidents or training mishaps. He pointed to a familiar face. Look, Assistant Director Parker appears in most of these cases. Sarah's hand shook as she finally opened the metal box. Inside lay a single DVD and a letter, dated 1 week before James Jr.'s death. Mom. If you're reading this, they've made me disappear, just like Dad. But I'm not dead, neither is he. I found him, Mom. Dad's alive. 20 years ago they discovered something within our military, a network of corrupt officials selling classified intelligence. Dad uncovered it, but they were too powerful. Faking his death was the only way to survive and keep investigating. I joined the same unit to find the truth. When I got close, Dad contacted me. We've been working together gathering evidence, but they caught on. Trust no one in uniform except General Anderson. He's been protecting us all along. The DVD contains everything: evidence, locations, names. Most importantly, it has Dad's location. I'm sorry for the pain you're about to endure, but it was the only way to keep you safe. Lucy's been trained to protect you and guide you to the next step. Love. James. Sarah sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Lucy nuzzled her hand, whining softly. 20 years of grief transformed into hope in an instant. They're both alive, she breathed. Both my boys are alive. Michael quickly scanned the storage unit. We need to move. They'll figure out this location soon. The DVD. A sharp knock on the storage unit's door cut him off. Lucy's ears perked up, but she didn't growl. Instead, her tail wagged slightly. Mrs. Wilson, General Anderson's voice came through quietly. I'm alone. It's time you knew the whole truth. Sarah looked at Lucy's relaxed posture, remembering James Jr.'s letter, trust no one in uniform except General Anderson. She took a deep breath and nodded to Michael. It was time to learn what really happened 20 years ago. General Anderson entered the storage unit, carefully closing the door behind him. His usual military bearing was softened by what appeared to be decades of carried guilt. I've been protecting your family for 20 years, he began, pulling out an old photograph. This was taken the day before James S.R. disappeared. The photo showed a younger Anderson with James S.R., both smiling after a mission briefing. Behind him, barely visible in the background, was Assistant Director Parker, his expression dark as he watched the two men. James S.R. came to me that day, Anderson continued, his voice heavy with memory. He'd discovered financial documents showing millions flowing through dummy corporations linked to high-ranking military officials, weapons sales, intelligence trading, strategic secrets being sold to the highest bidder. Sarah's analytical mind kicked in. The disappearances, they were all investigators who got too close. Anderson nodded. Parker headed a shadow unit within military intelligence. They eliminated threats to their operation. But James S.R. was too high profile to simply vanish. They needed a cover story. So they faked his death, Michael interjected, just like they tried with James Jr. Yes, but your husband outsmarted them. He left evidence in multiple locations, created a network of trusted allies. For 20 years he's been gathering proof, building a case that not even Parker could bury. Lucy suddenly tensed, her ears twitching. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. We have 3 minutes before my presence is missed, Anderson said quickly, pulling out a phone. This is a secure line. When you're ready to move, call the only number in it. A woman named Margaret will answer. She's been helping your husband all these years. Sarah clutched the phone. Why didn't James S.R. contact me all these years? And to protect you, Anderson's eyes softened. They watched you constantly. If you'd shown any sign of knowing the truth, Parker would have eliminated the threat. Your grief protected you. More footsteps closer now. James Jr. discovered the operation by accident. Anderson continued rapidly. He found old mission files that didn't add up. When he started asking questions, Parker noticed. I tried to warn him, guide his investigation quietly, but he was his father's son, determined to uncover the truth. And now Sarah's voice trembled. Now they're working together, gathering the final pieces. But Parker's suspects. The empty coffin was a message they knew we'd check. They're forcing her hand. Lucy growled softly at the door. One last thing. Anderson pulled out a key. Storage unit 401 across town. James S.R.'s original evidence is there. Everything you need to understand what really happened 20 years ago. He pressed the key into Sarah's hand. Be careful who you trust. Parker's network runs deep. Michael checked his watch. We need to move. Anderson straightened his uniform. I'll create a diversion. Head west, stay off main roads. And Sarah, he paused at the door. James S.R. never stopped loving you. Everything he did, every choice he made was to keep you safe. As Anderson left, Sarah held the key tightly. 20 years of questions were finally getting answers. But each revelation brought new dangers. The investigation her husband started, that her son continued, now fell to her. Well, Michael said, checking his weapon, looks like we're going to Unit 401. Sarah looked at the evidence wall her son had created, at the years of meticulous research. No, she decided, her analyst mind forming connections. First, we need to understand why they moved against James Jr. now. Something changed, something that made them desperate enough to risk exposing their whole operation. Lucy's tail wagged slightly, the same response she'd given when James Jr. was on the right track during training. Sarah stood stronger now, with purpose. They're not just hiding past crimes. Something's about to happen, something big enough to risk everything to stop James Jr. from exposing it. Michael nodded, understanding dawning. We're not just investigating a past conspiracy. We're racing to prevent a future one. Sarah finished. And somewhere out there, my husband and son are counting on us to finish what they started. In Michael's car, heading towards storage unit 401, Sarah finally allowed her composure to crack. 20 years of suppressed emotions burst forth like a broken dam. How could he do this to us? She demanded, her voice breaking. 20 years, Michael. 20 years. I thought he was dead. I raised our son alone, watched James Jr. graduate without his father, dealt with all the pitying looks and condolences. He could have found a way to tell me. Michael kept his eyes on the road, watching for tails. Sarah, you know why he couldn't. Do I? She pulled out the old family photo she always carried. James Jr. grew up without a father. Every Father's Day, every birthday, every achievement, he faced them alone. And all this time his father was out there watching from the shadows. Lucy whined from the back seat, sensing Sarah's distress. The worst part, Sarah continued, tears flowing freely now. James Jr. knew. He found his father, worked with him, and kept it from me too. My own son looked me in the eye and carried this secret. To protect you, Michael reminded her gently. To protect me. Sarah's voice rose. I was an intelligence analyst. I could have helped. Instead, they both decided I was too weak, too vulnerable to handle the truth. And now they're both gone, plan dead, while I'm left to piece together their breadcrumb trail of clues. She pulled out James Jr.'s letter, reading it again through tears. Look at this. Sorry for the pain you're about to endure. They planned this, Michael. Father and son plotting together, deciding once again that keeping me in the dark was for my own good. Michael pulled into a quiet side street, turning to face his friend. Sarah, listen to me. You have every right to be angry. But right now that anger needs to fuel you, not break you. They need you. Need me? She laughed bitterly. They've done just fine without me for 20 years. No, Michael's voice was firm. They survived without you. There's a difference. Everything in that storage unit, every piece of evidence James Jr. gathered, it wasn't just about exposing corruption. He was trying to find a way to bring his father home to you. To end this nightmare. Lucy moved forward, resting her head on Sarah's shoulder. The dog's presence was a reminder of James Jr.'s love. He'd trained her specifically to protect and comfort his mother. I found something in the storage unit you need to see, Michael said quietly, pulling out a small notebook. It was hidden behind the evidence wall. Sarah opened it, recognizing her son's handwriting. Day 847 of investigation. Found Dad's old case files. Everything makes sense now. Why he couldn't come home. Why he had to let us believe he was dead. The network runs deeper than anyone imagined. But I swear, Mom, I'm going to fix this. Going to bring him home to you. You deserve the truth. Deserve to know that every day he was away he was fighting to come back to us. Fresh tears fell, but different now. He was trying to fix our family, she whispered. Both of them were, Michael added. Everything they did, every secret they kept, it wasn't about not trusting you, Sarah. It was about finishing this fight so they could come home for good. Sarah wiped her eyes, looking at the key to Unit 401. Then let's help them finish it. But when I find them, she managed a small smile, they're both grounded for life. Lucy's tail wagged, and for a moment, Sarah could have sworn the dog was smiling too. First, Michael said, starting the car, we need to get to that storage unit. Whatever James Sr. hid there 20 years ago, it's the key to understanding everything. Ready? Sarah squared her shoulders, her analyst mind already cataloging the questions she needed answered. Ready. And this time I'm not just following their clues, I'm going to finish what they started. Storage Unit 401 was smaller than James Jr.'s unit, tucked away in the facility's oldest section. The key turned with difficulty in the rusted lock, the door groaning as they pulled it open. Unlike the meticulously organized command center in Unit 247, this space appeared abandoned, filled with dust-covered furniture and old military trunks. James Sr. was always clever about hiding things in plain sight, Sarah murmured, running her hand along a familiar dresser. He used to say the best place to hide something important was among things nobody would think to question. Lucy moved purposefully through the unit, her training evident as she sniffed systematically. She stopped at an old military footlocker, pawing at its surface. That's my hope chest, Sarah realized, kneeling beside it. The one I used when we first married. He kept it. Inside, beneath carefully preserved wedding memories and baby clothes, they found a false bottom. Michael helped pry it open, revealing a sealed metal container and a yellowed envelope. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened the letter, dated just days after James Sr.'s disappearance. My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, something's gone terribly wrong. The evidence in this box proves what I've discovered, but releasing it too soon would put countless lives at risk, including yours and our sons. What I found goes beyond simple corruption. These men, led by Parker, have built a shadow network within our military. They're not just selling secrets, they're shaping policy, manipulating global events, all for profit. I couldn't stand by and watch. But I couldn't risk them hurting you or James Jr. Disappearing was the only way to protect you while I gather enough evidence to bring them down. The hardest part isn't facing danger, it's knowing you think I'm dead. Knowing our son will grow up without his father. My only hope is that someday you'll understand why I had to make this choice. Inside this box is everything I've discovered, plus account numbers, names, and locations. But it's not complete. If you're reading this now, it means someone else has found what I couldn't finish. I love you more than life itself. That's why I had to leave, to make sure you had a life to live. Forever yours, James. Sarah pressed the letter to her chest, fresh tears falling. Michael opened the metal container, revealing documents, photographs, and a USB drive that looked remarkably new. This isn't from 20 years ago, Michael observed, examining the drive. This is recent, very recent. Lucy barked once, sharp and clear, her signal for discovering something important. James Jr. must have been here, Sarah realized. He found his father's evidence and added his own findings. She plugged the drive into her laptop, her analyst training taking over as she scanned through files. Oh my God, she breathed. This goes so much deeper than we thought. Parker's group, they're planning something big. Next week. Michael leaned in, reading over her shoulder. A coordinated operation. Multiple cities. They're going to. A sharp noise outside cut him off. Lucy's ears perked up, but instead of growling, her tail wagged slightly. "Hello, Sarah," a hauntingly familiar voice called softly from the doorway. "It's been a long time." Sarah froze, her heart stopping. She knew that voice, had heard it in her dreams for 20 years. Slowly she turned. James Wilson S.R. stood in the storage unit entrance, older but unmistakable. His hair had grayed, his face lined with years of hidden battles, but his eyes, those eyes that had first captured her heart, were exactly as she remembered. "I'm sorry," he said simply, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm so sorry for everything." Lucy moved between them, her tail still wagging, confirming what Sarah's heart already knew: this was really him. 20 years of grief, anger, love, and longing collided in Sarah's heart as she stared at her husband. The man she'd mourned. The man who'd chosen to let her believe he was dead. The man she'd never stopped loving. "James," she whispered, and the world seemed to hold its breath. For a long moment no one moved. The dust motes danced in the beam of light from the storage unit's single bulb, frozen in time like the scene below. Sarah took one step forward, then another. James S.R. remained still, his eyes never leaving her face. When she reached him, her hand rose slowly, touching his cheek, warm, real, alive. Then she slapped him. The sound cracked through the storage unit like a gunshot. Lucy whined softly. 20 years, Sarah's voice shook. 20 years of nightmares, of watching our son grow up without his father, of visiting an empty grave. "I deserve that," James S.R. said quietly. "I deserve much worse." "Where's our son?" Sarah demanded. "Where's James Jr.? Safe, hidden." "But we don't have much time." He reached for her hand, but she pulled back. "No, no more cryptic answers, no more secrets. You don't get to walk back into my life and start giving orders. I want the truth, all of it, now." Michael moved to guard the door, giving them privacy while keeping watch. James S.R. sank onto an old trunk, suddenly looking every one of his years. Barker's group, they call themselves the Foundation. They're planning something next week. A coordinated attack on multiple military installations disguised as a foreign terrorist operation. Why? Sarah pressed. Military contracts, defense spending. They're orchestrating a crisis to profit from the response. But it's more than money now. They're aiming for control. The chaos would let them place their people in key positions, expanding their influence. And James Jr. He got too close. Found evidence linking the Foundation to weapons sales, to orchestrated conflicts. When Parker realized who he was, "My son," they knew they had to act. But James Jr. was ready. "We'd planned for this." Sarah's analytical mind raced. The empty coffin, the dog, the storage units. "You two planned all of this." James S.R. nodded. "Every detail. We needed them to think they'd won, to think they'd successfully disappeared him like they did me. It was the only way to buy time." Time for what? To complete the evidence chain. To prove not just individual crimes but the entire conspiracy. James Jr. is finishing what I started, documenting their entire network, every player, every operation. Sarah's anger flared again. "And you thought I couldn't help? That I was better off thinking you were both dead?" "You were an intelligence analyst, Sarah, one of the best. That's exactly why we couldn't involve you directly. They watch analysts closest of all, looking for patterns, for someone piecing things together. Your genuine grief was your protection." "That's not your choice to make," she snapped. "Not for me, and not for our son." "No," James S.R. agreed softly. "It wasn't. I've had 20 years to regret that decision, Sarah. 20 years of watching from a distance as you suffered, as our boy grew up, as you both built a life without me. Every day I wanted to come home. Every day I told myself, just one more piece of evidence, one more connection, and I can end this." Tears rolled down his weathered cheeks. "I told myself I was protecting you. But maybe I was just a coward, too afraid to face what my choices had done to our family." Lucy, who had been watching the exchange intently, moved to sit between them. looking from one to the other as if trying to bridge the gap of 20 years. James Jr. Sarah's voice softened slightly. He found you? Or did you find him? He found me. 3 years ago. I'd been tracking his career, watching him rise through the ranks, proud but terrified he'd follow my path. Then one day he walked into my hideout, said, "Hi, Dad. We need to talk." Despite everything, Sarah felt a smile tug at her lips. That sounded exactly like their son. He was so angry at first, James S.R. continued. But when he saw the evidence, understood what I'd been fighting all these years, he made a choice. Said if I wouldn't come home, he'd help me finish this so I could. Michael cleared his throat from the doorway. "We need to move. Security patrol's due in 10 minutes. Sarah looked at her husband, the man she'd loved, lost, grieved, and found again. What happens now? Now, James S.R. stood. We finish this together. No more secrets, no more hiding. James Jr. is gathering the final proof we need, but he needs help. Will you help us, Sarah? Not because I'm asking, but because it's right." Sarah thought of the empty coffin, of her son's careful planning, of 20 years of lies told with love. She thought of the Foundation's plot, of the lives at stake, of justice too long delayed. "I'll help," she said finally, "but not for you, for our son, for the truth. And when this is over, you and I have 20 years of conversations to catch up on." James S.R. nodded, relief and regret mingling in his eyes. "I wouldn't expect anything less." Lucy barked once, tail wagging, as if approving the reconciliation, however tentative. First, Sarah said, her analyst mind already working, "Tell me everything about this attack they're planning. Every detail you and James Jr. have discovered. If we're going to stop it, I need to understand exactly what we're facing." As James S.R. began to explain, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in 20 years, the feeling of her family, however broken, beginning to heal. The briefing room at General Anderson's private residence was tense with anticipation. Sarah, James S.R., Michael, and Anderson sat around a table covered with documents and photographs, while Lucy maintained her vigilant watch by the door. "Parker's planning to strike in 3 days," Anderson explained, pointing to a map. 3 military installations simultaneously. They've spent years placing their people in key positions. "They're perfect crisis," Sarah added, her analyst mind connecting the dots. "But where's James Jr.? Why isn't he here?" James S.R. exchanged glances with Anderson. "He's infiltrated Parker's inner circle. Right now he's at their command center gathering final proof of the conspiracy." "You let him go in alone?" Sarah's voice rose sharply. "He volunteered," James S.R. said quietly. "Said he was the only one they wouldn't suspect. They think they scared him into hiding after the Coffin incident." A knock at the door made everyone freeze. Lucy's ears perked up, but she remained calm. "A friend, then." Colonel Richards entered, his face grave. "We have a problem," he announced. "Parker's moved up the timeline. The attack's happening tomorrow." What? Anderson stood abruptly. "Why?" "Because," a new voice said from the doorway, "I told them you were getting close." They turned to find Colonel Richards holding a gun, his true allegiance finally revealed. Lucy growled, low and threatening. "I've been watching you for months," Richards continued, "reporting every move. Did you really think Parker wouldn't have someone close to Anderson?" "You son of a," Michael started forward, but Richards raised the gun. "Don't. More men are coming. It's over. We know about James Jr.'s infiltration. He's probably already dead." Sarah felt her world tilt, but James S.R.'s hand found hers under the table, squeezing gently. "You're wrong," Sarah said, her voice steady despite her fear. "About everything, including how many people are watching you right now." Richard's confidence wavered slightly. "What are you talking about?" "Did you really think," another voice came from behind him, "that I wouldn't have a backup plan?" James Jr. stepped into view, very much alive, his gun pressed against Richard's back. Lucy's tail wagged in recognition. "Drop it," James Jr. ordered. Richards complied, his face ashen. Sarah stared at her son, alive, whole, standing in front of her for the first time since his death. He looked tired but determined. So much like his father, it made her heart ache. "Hi, Mom," he said softly. "Sorry about the Coffin thing." You're grounded, she managed through tears. Both of you. James Jr. smiled briefly before turning serious. Parker's on his way. He thinks Richard's lured you all into a trap. Instead, we've lured him into ours. Anderson finished, pulling out his phone. All units move in. Operation Eclipses go. Richard slumped in defeat as James Jr. handcuffed him. You don't understand. Parker's network is too big, too powerful. You'll never. Never what? James Sr. interrupted. Never get enough evidence. Never find all the conspirators. He opened his laptop, showing files upon files of data. For 20 years I've documented everything, every meeting, every transaction, every player. And my son, he spent the last week copying their entire database. Sarah moved to stand between her husband and son, her family finally together after 20 years of separation. The sound of helicopters and vehicles approaching filled the air. Parker's here, James Jr. announced, checking his phone. With his entire inner circle, just like we planned. How did you know they'd come? Richards demanded. Because Sarah answered, her analyst mind appreciating the elegance of the trap. You told them exactly what they wanted to hear. A chance to eliminate everyone who knew the truth all at once. It was too tempting to resist. Mom figured it out, James Jr. said proudly. As soon as we showed her the evidence, she saw the pattern, knew how they'd react. James Sr. looked at his wife with admiration and regret. We should have involved you from the beginning. Yes, she agreed, you should have. But right now we have a job to finish. Outside, they could hear Parker's voice barking orders, preparing to breach the house. He had no idea he was walking into a trap 20 years in the making. Lucy took up position by the door, ready to play her part. The dog that had helped unravel everything was about to help end it. Ready? James Jr. asked, looking at his parents. Sarah reached out, taking both their hands. Together this time, she said firmly, no more secrets, no more separate battles. Together, James Sr. agreed, squeezing her hand. The front door burst open downstairs. The final confrontation was about to begin. Parker burst into the briefing room with 4 armed men, his face contorted with rage. He stopped short at the sight before him, Richards in handcuffs, the Wilson family united, and General Anderson calmly sitting at the head of the table. It's over, Parker, Anderson said quietly. Your entire network is being rolled up as we speak. Over, Parker laughed, but there was an edge of desperation in his voice. I've spent 30 years building this. You think you can just... Yes, James Sr. interrupted, stepping forward. We can. Because while you were building your network of corruption, I was documenting every move you made. You, Parker spat. The ghost who wouldn't die. And your son, he turned to James Jr., following in Daddy's footsteps. How touching. Actually, James Jr. smiled. I did something better. I followed in my mother's footsteps. He nodded to Sarah. She was the analyst, remember? She taught me how to see patterns, how to predict your moves. Sarah felt pride surge through her chest. Even separated, her influence had shaped her son's path. You're surrounded, she told Parker. Every exit is covered. Your conspirators are being arrested across the city. That attack you planned for tomorrow? It's not happening. Parker's composure cracked slightly. Kill them, he ordered his men. Kill them all. But before anyone could move, Lucy sprang into action. The German Shepherd launched herself at the nearest gunman, while hidden FBI teams burst through both doors. In seconds, Parker's men were disarmed and on the ground. Like I said, Sarah stepped forward, facing the man who had torn her family apart. We predicted your moves. All of them. Parker looked around wildly, seeing his life's work crumbling. You don't understand. Everything I did was for power. James Sr. cut him off. Money. Control. Don't pretend it was anything else. As FBI agents led Parker and his men away, the Wilson family found themselves alone in the room with Anderson and Michael. Lucy returned to her post by the door, tail wagging with satisfaction. 20 years, Sarah said softly, looking at her husband and son. 20 years of planning, hiding, fighting, it's really over. James Jr. nodded, pulling her into a hug. It's over, Mom. We can come home. About that, she pulled back, fixing them both with a stern look. We need to talk about your communication skills, both of you. James S.R. winced. Sarah, No, let me finish. You both chose to carry this burden alone. You chose to let me think you were dead rather than trust me with the truth. Her voice cracked slightly. You know what that did to me? Mom, James Jr. said softly, we wanted to tell you every day. But one slip, one wrong move, and Parker would have. I know, she interrupted. I understand the reasons. But understanding doesn't make it hurt less. She looked between them, these two men who had sacrificed everything for justice. Promise me, promise me. Promise me no more secrets, no more lone crusades. Whatever comes next, we face it together. James S.R. stepped forward, taking her hand. 20 years had lined his face, silvered his hair, but his eyes were the same ones she'd fallen in love with. I promise. No more secrets, no more running. Me too, James Jr. added, joining them. Besides, you figured out in one day what took us years to piece together. We'd be idiots not to keep you on the team. Sarah laughed through her tears, pulling them both into a hug. Lucy bounded over, not wanting to be left out, making them all laugh as she tried to join the group embrace. Michael cleared his throat from the doorway. Hate to break up the reunion, but the press is gathering outside. The story's about to break. Let him wait, Sarah said firmly, holding her family close. We've waited 20 years for this moment. They can wait a few minutes more. As they stood there holding each other, Sarah felt the wounds of 20 years beginning to heal. They had a lot to work through, trust to rebuild, pain to address, time to make up for. But they were together. Finally, completely together. Lucy sat at their feet, her mission accomplished. The dog who had helped uncover the truth now watched over her reunited family, tail wagging contentedly. The world outside could wait. For now, in this moment, the Wilson family was whole again. The euphoria of reunion was shattered by a single phone call. Anderson's face grew grave as he listened, his knuckles whitening around the receiver. We missed one, he said, hanging up. Parker's second-in-command, Elizabeth Morrison. She's gone dark with a list of every undercover agent in their network. The room grew still. James S.R.'s face hardened with recognition. She was my contact 20 years ago, the one who warned me about Parker's plans. A double agent, Sarah realized, playing both sides all along. James Jr. straightened, his expression resolute. I know where she's going. There's a private airfield. No, Sarah cut him off, recognizing the look in his eyes. The same look his father had worn 20 years ago. We just got you back, both of you. We're not separating again. Mom, James Jr. said gently, if those names get out, dozens of agents will die. Families like ours will be torn apart. I have to go. Then we all go, she insisted, but James S.R. was already shaking his head. Someone has to stay and finish this, he said. Complete the official statements. Ensure Parker's network is completely dismantled. You're the only one who knows every piece of the puzzle now, Sarah. Don't you dare, she whispered. Don't you dare try to leave me again. James S.R. took her hands in his eyes filled with pain and determination. This time is different. This time you know we're alive. This time we're coming back. You don't know that. Her voice broke, either of you. James Jr. joined them, forming a tight circle. Yes, we do. Because this time we have something we didn't have before. He smiled at his mother. We have you watching our backs. Lucy whined softly, pressing against Sarah's leg. The dog knew, as she always did when her family was hurting. 2 hours, James S.R. promised. Give us 2 hours to end this, then we come home. For good. Sarah looked at her husband and son, these men who had sacrificed so much for justice, who were preparing to sacrifice just a little more. 1 hour, she countered, her analyst mind already forming plans, and you take Lucy, and you wear these. She pulled out 2 small tracking devices, and you stay on comms the entire time. They nodded, accepting her terms. This time she wouldn't be left in the dark. 1 hour, James Jr. confirmed, hugging her tight. Then we're having a proper family dinner. I haven't had your lasagna in weeks. Months, she corrected, holding him close. 20 years, James S.R. added softly, joining the embrace. The moment was brief but precious. Then father and son moved toward the door, Lucy at their heels. They paused at the threshold, looking back at Sarah. "We love you," James S.R. said simply. "I love you too," she replied. "Now go in this and come home." As they disappeared into the night, Sarah turned to Michael and Anderson. "Right. Let's make sure they have something to come home to. Show me everything we have on Elizabeth Morrison." Because this time was different. This time she wasn't a grieving widow or a worried mother. This time she was their partner, their protector, their way home. 40 minutes into the operation, Sarah's world collapsed again. The tracking signals from James S.R. and Junior suddenly went dark. "Last known location," she demanded, fingers flying over the keyboard. "The old warehouse district," Michael replied, pointing to the map. "Near the airfield." Sarah stared at the blinking cursor where her family had vanished, her mind racing through possibilities. The comms had gone silent moments before the trackers failed. Elizabeth knew, she realized. She knew they'd come after her. It's a trap. Anderson reached for his phone, ready to send in tactical teams, but Sarah held up her hand. "Wait." "Wait," Michael looked at her incredulously. "Sarah, they could be." "They're alive," she said firmly. "Elizabeth needs them alive. Those agent names are encrypted. She needs James S.R.'s decryption key. And James Jr. Leverage." Sarah's voice was steel, "to make his father cooperate." She stood, gathering her coat. Anderson stepped forward. "Sarah, you can't go out there. It's too dangerous." "I'm not going to make the same mistake they did," she replied. "I'm not going to try to protect everyone by working alone." She turned to Michael. "I need your help. Both of you." "What's your plan?" Sarah pulled out an old photograph from her Persher and Elizabeth 20 years ago at a military wives' luncheon. "Elizabeth didn't just betray my husband. She betrayed me too. We were friends. She watched me grieve, watched me raise James Jr. alone, all while knowing the truth." Her hands clenched around the photo. "She thinks she knows all our weaknesses, but she's forgotten something crucial." "What's that?" Michael asked. "That I was an intelligence analyst before I was a wife or mother. And I've had 20 years to think about what I would do differently if I ever got another chance to protect my family." She spread out a map of the warehouse district. "Elizabeth will be expecting a tactical response. Teams of agents, maybe even military support. She won't be expecting me." "Because you're just the grieving widow?" Anderson asked. Sarah smiled grimly. "Because she thinks she broke me 20 years ago. She thinks the Sarah Wilson she knew, the analyst, the fighter, died with her husband. She's about to learn how wrong she is." She laid out her plan quickly, efficiently. Michael and Anderson listened, adding suggestions, refining details. This wasn't just about saving her family now. This was about ending a 20-year game that had destroyed too many lives. "Are you sure about this?" Michael asked finally. "It's risky." Sarah looked at the silent tracking screens, thinking of her husband and son, of 20 years of separation and sacrifice, of the promise they'd made just an hour ago: no more secrets, no more lone crusades. "I'm sure," she said, "because this time we're doing this my way, together." She checked her watch. "We have 18 minutes before their deadline. Let's move." As they headed out, Sarah touched the wedding ring she'd never stopped wearing. 20 years ago, she'd been powerless to prevent her family from being torn apart. But not this time. This time she was ready. This time she would bring them home. Inside the dimly lit warehouse, Elizabeth Morrison faced her captives with cold satisfaction. James S.R. and Junior were bound to chairs, while Lucy lay unconscious nearby, tranquilized. "You know what I want," Elizabeth said, holding up a flash drive. "The decryption key, James. Or your son pays the price for your stubbornness." James S.R. strained against his bonds, his voice hoarse. "Those agents have families, Elizabeth, children, just like you did." Had she corrected sharply. "Before Parker's operation got my husband killed. 20 years playing both sides, waiting for my chance at revenge." "And how many more families will you destroy to get it?" James Jr. asked, blood trickling from a cut above his eye. As many as it takes. She checked her watch. 10 minutes until my flight. Last chance, James. The noise from outside made her pause. Footsteps. A door opening. That's close enough, Elizabeth called out, drawing her weapon. Show yourself. Sarah Wilson stepped into the light, hands raised. Sarah Elizabeth's surprise was genuine. How did you find you? Sarah moved forward slowly. I remembered something. 20 years ago at Emily's birthday party, you mentioned this place, said your father used to own it. Stay back, Elizabeth warned, but her hand trembled slightly. You know what else I remember, Sarah continued, her voice steady. You held my hand at James's funeral. You brought casseroles for weeks. You helped me pick out James Jr.'s college applications. I had to maintain my cover, Elizabeth said, but doubt crept into her voice. No, you were my friend. That part wasn't a lie, was it? I saw how it hurt you watching me grieve. Elizabeth's gun wavered. You don't understand. Parker killed Tom, my husband. I do understand, Sarah interrupted, better than anyone. But this, she gestured to James S.R. and Jr., this makes you no better than Parker. Mom, James Jr. warned, seeing Elizabeth's finger tighten on the trigger. But Sarah kept moving forward. You've spent 20 years plotting revenge. I spent 20 years rebuilding, finding purpose, raising a son who chose justice over vengeance. She was within arm's reach now. It's not too late, Elizabeth. Not for redemption, not for peace. For a moment the warehouse hung in perfect silence. Then Lucy, who had been playing unconscious, suddenly lunged, knocking Elizabeth off balance. In the same instant, Michael and Anderson burst in from different entrances. The flash drive clattered to the floor as Elizabeth's gun went flying. Sarah moved swiftly, helping Michael secure her while Anderson freed James S.R. and Jr. How did you know I was faking? Lucy licked James Jr.'s face as he knelt beside her. Because, Sarah smiled, she was my friend, and I taught her everything she knew about tranquilizers during our time at the agency, including the correct dosage for a dog Lucy's size. Elizabeth, now handcuffed, looked at Sarah with a mix of respect and regret. You were always the better analyst. No, Sarah corrected, helping her sons untie James S.R. I just never forgot what I was fighting for. As agents led Elizabeth away, the Wilson family gathered in a tight circle, Lucy prancing joyfully around them. I believe, Sarah said, checking her watch, you two promised me dinner. James S.R. pulled her close, kissing her forehead. 1 hour, just like we promised. Actually, James Jr. grinned. It was 58 minutes. Mom's plan worked perfectly. Together they walked out of the warehouse into the dawn of a new day, a day without secrets, without separation, without fear. The price of loyalty had been high, but its rewards were finally within reach. 2 days later, the Wilson family gathered in their living room, surrounded by 20 years of memories and unopened truths. Lucy lay contentedly at their feet, the family finally complete. I think it's time, Sarah said softly, placing an old leather journal on the coffee table. I need to hear the whole story, from the beginning. James S.R. picked up the journal, his hands trembling slightly. I wrote this during those years away. Every day, everything I couldn't tell you. He opened to the first page and began to read. October 15, 2004. Dearest Sarah, today I had to die. Today I had to leave you and our son. Parker's men were closing in. They'd already killed 3 agents who discovered their operation. I couldn't let you and James Jr. become targets. The hardest part wasn't faking my death. It was watching from the shadows as you fell to your knees at my funeral. As our 8-year-old son tried to be strong for his mother. Every fiber of my being screamed to run to you, to tell you it wasn't real. But I made a choice. To protect you by leaving. To fight them from the shadows where they couldn't hurt you, to get to me. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes. Where did you go? Underground networks, James S.R. explained. Safe houses. Moving constantly. But I never went far. He turned the page. I was there, Sarah, hidden but there. At James Jr.'s high school graduation. At his military academy ceremony, every Christmas I'd watch through windows as you kept our traditions alive. James Jr. leaned forward. When did you start suspecting I was following your trail? James S.R. smiled sadly. The moment you joined my old unit, I knew then you'd either find the truth, or he faltered, or end up like you, Sarah finished. That's why you finally contacted him. Yes, I couldn't let history repeat itself. But James Jr. surprised me. He didn't just want answers, he wanted to finish what I'd started. To bring down Parker's entire network. To bring you home, James Jr. corrected. That was always the goal. Sarah touched the journal gently. All these years you were writing to me. Every day, James S.R.'s voice cracked. Everything I couldn't say. Every moment I missed. Every time I saw you struggling alone and had to stop myself from coming home. He turned to the last entry, dated just weeks ago. Sarah. Our son found me. He has your strength, your determination. Together we're close to ending this, but I'm afraid. Not of Parker, not of death. I'm afraid that when the truth comes out, you won't be able to forgive me for choosing duty over our family. For making our son carry this burden too. If you're reading this, it means we succeeded. It means I can finally come home. I just pray it's not too late for us. Sarah took the journal, holding it close. 20 years of letters I never got to read. 20 years of watching from a distance. It must have been. Torture, James S.R. finished. But necessary, to keep you safe, to give us a chance at a future. And now, she asked softly. Now he reached for her hand. If you'll let me, I'd like to spend the next 20 years making up for the ones we lost. Lucy raised her head, tail wagging as if sensing the shift in mood. The worst was over. The truth was out. What remained was the slow, careful work of rebuilding. As the evening deepened, James S.R. spread photos and documents across the coffee table, creating a timeline of his 20-year mission. It started with routine intelligence reports, he explained. Discrepancies in weapons contracts, missing funds, classified information appearing in unexpected places. Small things, but they formed a pattern. Sarah studied a photograph of Parker with various military officials. How deep did it go? Deeper than anyone imagined. Parker had spent decades placing his people in key positions. It wasn't just about money anymore. They were influencing military policy, manipulating international relations. James Jr. picked up a document. When did you realize Elizabeth was involved? About 5 years in. I trusted her at first. She'd lost her husband, seemed to be fighting the same battle. But then I noticed she always seemed to be one step ahead, always had inside information she shouldn't have known. She played both sides perfectly, Sarah mused. Even I never suspected, and I saw her almost every day. That's what made her so valuable to Parker, James S.R. continued. She was above suspicion. The grieving widow, just like you. Who would question her motives? Lucy whined softly, sensing the tension in the room. James Jr. scratched her ears absently. The hardest part, James S.R. said, looking at his son, was watching you follow in my footsteps. Knowing you were putting the pieces together, getting closer to danger. Is that why you left the clues? James Jr. asked. The old case files, the mission reports with missing pages. James S.R. nodded. I knew if you found the truth, you'd understand why I had to disappear. But I never expected you to join the fight. What choice did I have? James Jr. smiled slightly. My father taught me that some things are worth sacrificing everything for. Sarah touched the photo of James S.R., watching from a distance as James Jr. graduated from the academy. All those years you were protecting us both. Trying to, James S.R. corrected. But in the end, you both proved stronger than anything I could do to protect you. He looked at his son, became a better agent than I ever was. And you. He turned to Sarah, never stopped being the brilliant analyst who first caught my attention all those years ago. We make quite a team, James Jr. said, gathering the documents. The agent who disappeared, the son who found him, and the analyst who brought them both home. Don't forget Lucy, Sarah added, as the dog's tail thumped against the floor. She played her part perfectly. Actually, James S.R. reached into his jacket. "There's one more piece of the mission you need to see." He pulled out a small, worn notebook. "This is every Operation Parker's network has planned for the next 5 years. Their entire playbook." Sarah took the notebook, her analyst mind already working. "With this we can prevent their plans from ever being carried out. Stop them before they start." "More than that," James Jr. added. "We can protect other families from going through what we did." James Sr. watched his wife and son poring over the notebook, working together as if they'd never been apart. 20 years of sacrifice had led to this moment, his family not just reunited but stronger, working together to ensure no other family would face the same choices he had made. Lucy settled between them, her mission of keeping the family together finally complete. Later that night, as Sarah made coffee in the kitchen, she discovered one final secret. A small envelope fell from James Jr.'s old baseball cap, tucked away in a cabinet. Inside was a photograph she'd never seen before, dated just 6 months after James Sr.'s death. She carried it back to the living room, where both men were still discussing the notebook's contents. "What is this?" she asked quietly. James Sr. and Jr. exchanged glances. The photo showed 8-year-old James Jr. sitting on a park bench, clearly talking to someone just out of frame. The date stamp told her exactly who that someone was. "You met," she whispered. "Even then." James Jr. stood, taking the photo. "Once a year on my birthday. Mom, I'm so sorry. We should have told you." "It started by accident," James Sr. explained. "I was watching from a distance as always. But James Jr. saw me. He was only 8, but he recognized me immediately." James Jr. continued softly, "I wanted to tell you so badly, but Dad explained why we couldn't. That bad people would hurt you if they knew he was alive." "So you carried that secret," Sarah said. "All those years, every birthday." "We'd meet for exactly 1 hour," James Jr. said. "Talk about school, about you, about life. Then we'd go back to pretending." Lucy patted over, sensing Sarah's distress. But instead of anger, Sarah felt a strange sense of peace washing over her. "You know what this means?" she asked, looking at the photo again. "Even then we were never truly broken. Our family survived in secret meetings and hidden moments. In a little boy who understood enough to keep the most important secret of his life." James Sr. moved to her side. "I taught him what I knew about staying hidden, protecting those we love. I never imagined he'd use those lessons to protect me too." "Like father, like son," Sarah smiled through tears. "Both of you so determined to carry the weight of the world alone." "Not anymore," James Jr. promised, joining them. "From now on we carry it together." Lucy barked softly, making them all laugh. "Yes, you too, girl," Sarah patted the dog's head. "Our faithful guardian." James Sr. picked up his journal from the coffee table. "There's something else you should know. Every year, after meeting James Jr., I'd write you a letter, telling you about how he'd grown, how proud I was, how much I missed you." He opened the journal to a hidden compartment, revealing 20 carefully preserved letters, each dated on their son's birthday. "I kept them," he said quietly, "hoping someday I could give them to you, hoping you'd understand why we had to keep these moments secret." Sarah took the letters, feeling the weight of 20 years of unspoken words. "Read them to me," she asked. "Both of you. Tell me about these birthdays I never knew about." As they settled on the couch, Lucy curled at their feet. James Sr. opened the first letter. "Dear Sarah, today I saw our son. He's grown so tall, just like you said he would." Together they began to fill in the missing pieces of their family's story. Not just the conspiracy and danger, but the small, precious moments that had kept their bonds alive through 20 years of separation. It wasn't just the story of a mission anymore. It was the story of a family that had never truly broken, only bent under the weight of necessary secrets. A family that was finally completely whole again. A month later, the Wilson family gathered around their dining table for Sunday dinner, a tradition reborn. The aroma of Sarah's lasagna filled the house, mixed with the warm scent of garlic bread and the sound of genuine laughter. "Remember your first attempt at making this?" Mom, James Jr. teased, helping himself to a second serving. "After Dad left, I think we ordered pizza 3 times that week." Sarah smiled, the memory no longer painful. I was determined to master it. Your father always said it was his favorite. It still is, James S.R. said softly, reaching for her hand across the table. Even better than I remembered. Lucy lay contentedly under the table, moving occasionally to accept treats from each family member, a practice Sarah pretended not to notice. The past month had been one of adjustment and healing. Simple moments became precious: morning coffee shared in comfortable silence, evening walks with Lucy, family movies where no one had to pretend or hide anymore. I've been thinking, Sarah said, setting down her wine glass, about all those missed birthdays, holidays, anniversaries. Both men tensed slightly, but she continued with a smile. We should celebrate them. All of them. One each weekend until we're caught up. That's 20 years of celebrations, James Jr. calculated, grinning. About a year's worth of parties. Exactly, Sarah nodded. Starting with your 10th birthday, the first one you shared with your father in secret. I want to hear every detail, see every memory through both your eyes. James S.R.'s hand tightened around hers. I'd like that, to finally share those moments with you. Plus, James Jr. added mischievously, this means 20 years worth of presents. They laughed, the sound filling the room with warmth. Lucy's tail thumped against the floor in response. You know, Sarah said, looking at a reunited family, for 20 years I thought we were broken. But we weren't, were we? We were just waiting. All of us, in our own ways, fighting to find our way back to this table. James S.R. stood, pulling her into an embrace. James Jr. joined them, and even Lucy got up to press against their legs, unwilling to be left out of the family moment. To new traditions, James S.R. proposed. And old ones made new again, Sarah added. To family, James Jr. finished simply. Outside, the sun was setting on another peaceful day, the kind of day they'd fought 20 years to make possible. The kind of day they'd never take for granted again. The morning of Parker's sentencing dawned clear and bright. The Wilson family sat together in the courtroom, Lucy at their feet with her therapy dog credentials allowing her presence. The dog who had helped uncover the truth would see justice served. Parker and Elizabeth stood before the judge, their once powerful presence diminished by prison uniforms and the weight of their exposed crimes. The defendants had been found guilty of conspiracy, treason, and multiple counts of endangering national security, the judge began. However, before I pass sentence, the court will hear victim impact statements. Sarah stood first, her voice clear and strong. 20 years ago, these people stole my husband from me and my son's father from him. They forced a good man to choose between his family and his duty. They watched me grieve, pretended to comfort me, all while knowing the truth. She paused, looking at Elizabeth. But they didn't break us. Every attempt to tear our family apart only proved how unbreakable we truly are. James Jr. spoke next. I grew up watching my mother try to be both parents, never knowing my father was watching from the shadows, protecting us the only way he could. You didn't just steal our past, you tried to steal our future. Finally, James S.R. addressed the court. Your Honor, I spent 20 years gathering evidence against these people. Not for revenge, but for justice. Not just for my family, but for every family they've hurt, every life they've damaged in their pursuit of power. Parker stared straight ahead, unmoved, but Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, she whispered, turning to Sarah. You were my friend, I should have. Yes, Sarah replied simply, you should have. The judge's sentence was swift and severe, life imprisonment without possibility of parole. As Parker and Elizabeth were led away, the Wilson family held each other close. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited with cameras and questions, but the family walked past them, Lucy proudly leading the way. Where to now? James Jr. asked. Home, Sarah answered. We have 20 years of memories to make up for, and I'm not wasting another minute on the people who tried to take them from us. James S.R. squeezed her hand. The mission that kept us apart is finally over. No, Sarah corrected gently. Our most important mission is just beginning. What's that? James Jr. asked. Being a family again. Making up for lost time. Creating new memories to replace the ones we lost. Lucy barked in agreement, making them all smile. They walked away from the courthouse together, leaving behind 2 decades of secrets and lies. Justice had been served, but their real victory wasn't in the courtroom, it was in the simple fact that they were walking home together, a family whole and healing at last. 1 year later, the Wilson family gathered in their backyard for a very special celebration. The garden was decorated with lights and a banner read "Happy First Re-Anniversary." Sarah stood in front of her friends and family, holding James Sr.'s hands as they prepared to renew their vows. James Jr. stood beside them as best man, while Lucy sat attentively nearby, wearing a flower collar for the occasion. 21 years ago, Sarah began, her voice strong and clear. "I lost you. Or so I thought. Today we're not just renewing our vows, we're making new ones. Ones that reflect everything we've learned about love, sacrifice, and forgiveness." James Sr. squeezed her hands gently. "Sarah, when I left, I thought I was protecting our family. What I didn't realize was that you were always the strongest one among us. You kept our family's heart beating through 20 years of silence. You taught our son about love and loyalty. And when the time came, you brought us both home. My vow to you today," Sarah continued, "is no more secrets, no more separate battles. Whatever comes, we face it together." "And my vow," James Sr. responded, "is to never leave again. To make up for every moment we lost, to create new memories to fill the spaces between." James Jr. stepped forward, surprising them both by adding his own vow, "And I promise to always be the bridge that connects you both, the son who carries both your strengths, and the reminder of why our family fought so hard to find its way back together." Lucy barked softly, making everyone laugh. "And we promise to always keep Lucy supplied with treats," Sarah added, smiling at their faithful companion. Michael, standing among the guests, raised his glass. "To the Wilson family, proof that love doesn't break, it just finds new ways to grow stronger." As the evening progressed, the family danced under the stars, shared stories with friends, and celebrated not just their reunion but their renewal. Lucy pranced between guests, collecting pets and treats, her mission of keeping the family together now a joyful duty rather than a desperate one. Later, as Sarah and James Sr. swayed to their wedding song, she whispered, "Do you remember what you said to me at our first wedding?" "That you were my North Star," he replied, "the light that would always guide me home." "And here we are," she smiled. "Home at last." James Jr. joined them on the dance floor, Lucy following faithfully. The Wilson family, once broken by duty and sacrifice, now stood whole and healing, their bond stronger for having been tested by time and truth. Above them, the stars twinkled like promises kept, and ahead of them stretched a future full of the simple, precious moments they'd fought so hard to reclaim. In every family story there are moments of heartbreak and healing, sacrifice and redemption. The Wilson family's journey reminds us that true love never dies, it simply finds new ways to survive. For 20 years their family appeared broken on the surface, but beneath the pain and separation, their bonds grew stronger through secret birthday meetings, hidden acts of protection, and unwavering hope. To those who have experienced loss, who have felt the weight of unspoken words and missed moments, remember, it's never too late for healing. Like Sarah Wilson, who discovered that her 20 years of grief had actually been 20 years of silent protection, we too might find that our deepest wounds can lead to our greatest reconciliations. The story teaches us that forgiveness isn't just about letting go of the past, it's about embracing the possibility of a new future. Whether you're carrying decades of hurt or years of misunderstanding, remember that every sunrise brings a new chance to rebuild, reconnect, and restore what was lost. Just as Lucy the dog never lost faith in her family's reunion, hold on to hope. Because sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our lives begin after the hardest ones end. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.